To welcome you to the Graduate Studies webinar series. We've been doing this we've been doing the webinar series for a couple of years now. So this year we've been doing a monthly, and we're really thrilled to, by the way, I'm Patricia Campbell, Assistant Provost, Graduate Studies, and we are going to be recording this, so I want everyone to know that. And I want to thank Mybrit, who is actually going to be the master behind the scenes working all this and recording it for us. And what we're going to do is we'll have a presentation, and feel free to put questions as we're going through the presentation. Put your questions over here in the chat box, and we'll be happy to address those as we go along. And I wanted to make a note that the recordings, as I said, this is going to be recorded. The recordings end up in the library, and the link that I posted are up on the chat there. That's where you can find all the previous webinars that we've done. There's just a bunch of topics. You can just go to the library, and it's everything from kind of what is theory, how to get published, information about programs. It's just a rich resource, so I'd encourage you, if you haven't yet been over there, to go take a look and listen. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kick this off. So let me introduce the two speakers for today. And Mybrit, are you driving the PowerPoint or mine?
I can do that, or the other ladies can.
I think I'll let them. All right, so joining us from Student Services is Kelsey and Cherie, and they're going to talk a little bit about coping with stress in graduate school. And I don't want to steal any of their thunder by any means, but this is such an incredibly important topic, and I'm so grateful that they're here to talk to us about it. And I have a few things that I'll say at the end, but let me go ahead and turn it over to you ladies.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Hello and welcome, everyone. We want to thank you for joining us for a topic I'm sure we can all relate to, especially during this time of year. My name is Cherie Brown. Like she said, I am a graduate advisor. I've been with APUS for almost 7 years now, and I'm also currently pursuing a Master in Science in Sports and Health Sciences. Two of my advising colleagues, Conagus and Kelsey, are also here to help with the presentation and also answer any questions you all may have. With the holidays upon us, I'm sure we have all had days like this. I'm sure we can all relate to being pulled in 1,000,001 different directions. And while this time of year increases stress for all of us, it's especially true for us that are pursuing graduate studies and trying to successfully complete our degrees program. And while we know we'll never be able to fully eradicate stress, and in fact, some stress is actually healthy, the overall purpose and the goal of this presentation is pretty simple. We hope that you walk away with this presentation with at least one practical tip or strategy to help you manage the stress of being in grad school. So let's get started. So tip number one is know and understand the grad workload expectations. So whether or not you decide to take one class every other month or stagger your courses monthly, understanding the workload expectations can help you schedule and plan ahead. Knowing the workload expectations can also help you manage your course load when you're looking at your priorities overall. If you work long hours and you have lots of family obligations, taking 2 classes in an 8-week session may not be the best idea. Use your best judgment when determining how many courses to take per session, and that you make sure that that actually fits sensibly into your daily priorities. So that way you can reduce stress as well as ensure your own academic success. Another thing to keep in mind is managing the content of the courses that you select. So if you do select to take 2 courses concurrently, we want to advise that you review the archive syllabi, which is found in the course scheduling, and then try to pair 2 courses that you are comfortable with taking. Taking a course that you're already familiar with, or at least the content, or excited about, along with a course that may be more challenging, can actually help balance that workload. If you need help locating the archive syllabus for any of the courses, you can just let us know. Tip number 2 is knowing the grade expectations of a grad student. To avoid the stress of being placed on academic risk or warning, we want you all to strive to earn at least a B in all of your classes, so that way you maintain positive and good academic standing. And so that way you're also eligible to complete your final program requirement and then graduate at the end of your program. For me, taking 1 class at a time has been pivotal to kind of help me prioritize like working full-time, advising you all as needed, and then also having to take one class every 8 weeks with everything else that's going on outside of work and school. So that actually has helped me maintain a 4.0 so far in my program and to also avoid academic overload. So tip number 3 is to create a time management and organizational system that works for you. If you're sharper in the early mornings, use that time to work on assignments or discussion board replies for the week. We also suggest that you be proactive and try to work ahead or at least be on time. So of course, don't procrastinate. Online courses, as you all know, require a great deal of discipline. So in order to succeed, it's always best to stay on top of what's expected in each of your courses. And again, to keep in mind that those 8 weeks do go by pretty quickly. We suggest that you always keep in contact with your instructor if you're having difficulties understanding something or you have an unexpected emergency. Remember, us being online, if we don't tell them, they don't know. That's why open communication and being proactive is crucial to your academic success. If there's a situation where you feel you can't complete a course or be proactive, be sure to call us. Call the advising team to discuss your options. We'll be happy to help. Kelsey, would you like to share how you structure your time to complete 2 classes at a time, as well as other tips to manage stress?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So I have been taking about 2 classes at a time since maybe the middle of the summer. And some of the points that Cherie made earlier definitely coincide with helping to manage the workload, kind of pairing classes that you feel are going to be work well together, pretty much. Like, for example, I'm taking an elective course. Right now it's a history class. I really enjoy history, and sometimes the assignments don't really feel like work because I just enjoy them so much. And at the same time, I did overlap a month of finance class, which is definitely not something I enjoy nearly as much as history. So that planning is definitely integral if you wanted to overlap. In addition to that, I structure my weeks pretty appropriately to the coursework. So on Mondays, I will work on the forums for 1 class and check in on any assignments that may be due at the end of the week and sort of maybe start those if I have the time in the evening. And on Tuesdays, I'll work on the forums for the other class. So usually I'll start with the more difficult subject on Monday, just kind of go in head on and see if there's any particular, maybe the lesson that week is a little bit more challenging for me. So this way I am at the beginning of the week working ahead and getting in touch with my professor if I feel like I need supplemental material. So working that way, I'm able to turn in my assignments early as well. I'll probably finish up assignments on Wednesdays or Thursdays and kind of have a free rest of the week as well. So those are kind of my tips with the way that I schedule things out. And so we will be moving on to something I also find super important, minding your diet. Remember to take care of your body. Taking care of your body is taking care of your mind. Drink a lot of water. Aim to eat a balanced diet. Try to limit the junk and processed foods to cope with stress. And this is something that I have to remind myself all the time because I'll go for the chips and the junk over anything else. But if I go for like carrots, almonds, or cucumbers, I find that I'm way more productive and I don't feel nearly as junky at the end of the day. And that's the last thing that you want, really, to just not feel the energy to, after many of you work full time, feel the energy to continue to work a little bit on your assignments at the end of the day. And then this is probably my favorite slide. Be sure to schedule time for some fun in your life. It's definitely important. Like I mentioned earlier, I make a point to have my Friday and Saturdays pretty freed up, so I have the time to dedicate to my hobbies and my social life as well. So yeah, take another evening off. If you find that you are pretty stressed out, I always recommend maybe yoga. There's a lot of helpful videos on YouTube as well. If you're in the middle of a paper and feeling like, wow, I really can't come up with a new idea, I have no idea where to go from this point in the paper, take a break, walk outside, do a little something else, take that break, and maybe even switch up the room that you're working in. change that environment a little bit. Maybe it'll kind of kickstart something in your brain there. Exercising definitely helps as well. I like to exercise in the mornings. That way I'm set for the day and I have high energy. That, coupled with some healthy eating, is a great way to keep moving forward. So as well, if you need to consider taking a month or two off from school, do it. If you really are feeling burned out, take the little bit of a break. So remember, we do allow about 7 years for you to complete your graduate degree with us. Don't be afraid to take off that month, because the last thing that you want to do is end up really feeling burned out and not giving it your all towards the end of your program, when it tends to be pretty important when you're getting to your capstone and everything. And the last tip here is know your resources. So don't be afraid to ask us for help. You have so many opportunities to get in touch with advising, with the library, with your professors as well. Don't be afraid to ask for a course extension. We totally understand if something happens, maybe you have a health emergency or somebody in your family does, that's going to need your time for a week or two. And an extension is definitely something to kind of fall back on if you feel like you're not going to be able to complete everything within that timely manner. But again, your professor's not going to know unless you tell them as well. So don't be afraid to reach out to us as well if you need some help with some scheduling and planning assistance, email, phone, all of that. And finally, if you're feeling like you're really having a hard time in your personal life, don't feel like you're alone at all. We have a university chaplain, Dr. Cynthia Lindenmeyer. If you need to speak with a mental health professional, she has connections throughout the country and the world due to her work with the military. So jot down that email address. I'm sure that Dr. Cynthia will be able to help you out and get you in touch with somebody if needed. And so I will turn it back over to Cherie to see if anybody has any questions for us.
Yeah, we wanted to ask if you all had any questions, and we do see that there's a lot of academics in the building. So if you all have any tips that we haven't already covered that you think would be helpful to help manage stress, feel free to chime in. You can go ahead and use the chat bar, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
Yeah, this is...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is Patricia, and one of the things a friend of mine actually recently, just this morning, sent this to me. We were in grad school together, and so he sent me this piece, and the title of it is, "There's an Awful Cost to Getting a PhD That No One Talks About." And basically the point of the piece is, and this is for doctoral, but I think there's lots of ways this resonates for graduate students as well. It really talks about kind of the mental health aspect of advanced degrees, the time spent getting it, the kinds of challenges. I think sometimes we underestimate the feeling of isolation that you can have when you're working on a degree, particularly in an online environment, right? You feel like you're just kind of on your own, and that there's no one else really understands what you're going through. And sometimes the other thing that, and this is definitely true for doctoral, but I think could be true as well for some master's students, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, is that there's this whole kind of imposter syndrome that a lot of doctoral students feel, that somehow, and even some graduate students, I think sometimes, of like, wow, am I really ready for this? Can I really handle this? Am I faking it? It's that sort of feeling like somehow they don't belong. And I'm wondering, as you've spoken with students, have you run into that kind of issue? Do you ever see students who kind of feel like, wow, I'm in over my head, I really don't belong here?
We do indeed, and that was the reason why we wanted to plug Dr. Lindenmeyer, because a lot of times, if it goes beyond academics, we're not certified, or, we don't necessarily know how to coach folks through, like, the mental health issues and the stress of being in a grad program, other than, like we've mentioned here, take one class at a time, keep in touch with us if you need extensions, if you need help with planning and scheduling. But beyond that, that's beyond the scope of our comfort level. So again, being able to defer to Dr. Lindenmeyer is helpful, just so that, again, if they do need to speak to someone, on professional level to try to get through, some anxieties and things that are beyond the scope of academics, then, it's important to know your resources and be able to use them accordingly. I know for me, when I get stressed personally, a good run, as long as I'm not trying to reach for the chips beforehand, if I do a good run and get a good sweat, like that, gets the endorphins running, and then after that I'm able to kind of like recharge and get back to, completing whatever assignment or discussion board that I was working on. So that was just something else that I found helpful.
And keeping an open line of communication with the people in your life as well. This is a pretty big time commitment, and many of you have families and those kinds of obligations. It's good to say no to some plans. It's important to recognize when you do need those breaks, and but when you also need to prioritize your homework over things. So keeping that open discussion with the people in your life is definitely going to help alleviate some of that stress there.
I like Dr. Katoudi's suggestion about reducing the intake of nicotine, caffeine, and alcohol. And I'm sure it is tough being in Seattle, especially with, the season and everything changing too. I think that also, in addition to the holidays, can stress people out, less hours of daylight. So again, just trying to be mindful of the different things that can affect our studies, and just, taking care of yourself and not forgetting that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think having support, one of the things some of the research I've seen in terms of, what makes students successful. What makes students successful is often having a really good support system around them. And I think that's really critical. We underestimate that as well, that you need to have people in your life who can encourage you and support you, and even, there's this weird sort of, I think it was a Freakonomics study where they kind of did this survey of people, and they did it around a variety of topics, but for one of them was for people trying to lose weight. For people trying to lose weight, if your friends around you were also trying to lose weight or healthier or, a more healthy body weight than you tended to be, there was sort of this weird ancillary effect of who you surrounded yourself with in terms of how that impacted your own behavior in kind of ways that are really probably unconscious, right, in many ways. So thinking about who could you surround yourself with who would help you with these endeavors, I think is a really important thing as well.
Very true.
So Kim, it looks like, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, we always end up talking at the same time, it seems like. Kind of going off of that support network, there's another unique opportunity in utilizing the mentor relationship in ClearPath, as well as the communities. So you can find community based off of your interests and study. You don't particularly have to join a community that is your degree plan, but maybe something with your interests. So that way you're connecting with, your colleagues and your peers in another unique way, and sort of developing a school support system as well to fall back on.
ClearPath, that's a great idea. Form communities around either kind of your discipline, what you're studying, or even they can form their own self-communities, right, around topics or things they're interested in, right?
I believe the communities are pre-made as well. They're sort of rolling out a couple of new ones as well, sort of building off of the subjects, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, somebody feel free to jump in if they have more insight on that.
I have to say I'm not as familiar with that as I should be, but I think there's definitely opportunities there. I'm going to go back. There's a question there are a couple of comments here, so let me scroll. Kim said, is a counselor helping my students complete self-care plan? Oh, I like that. Plan to stay in touch with their own personal mental health and stress levels. I like that. I think that's a really interesting thing. I was thinking, I know there's a lot of program directors and faculty directors who are on the call thinking about, in the first class, in the first graduate course, maybe there's an exercise to be had there where students talk about what are they going to do, what kind of supports are they going to rely on to get through the program, how are they going to plan their studies, how are they going to try to overcome obstacles. It's getting at that sort of intentionality. I know they've added stuff like that when you sign up for things like Coursera, because they realize that a lot of people aren't really finishing MOOCs, and they're trying to put in place ways for people to actually kind of be more intentional about what they're doing and say how they're going to overcome barriers and obstacles. And they found in some cases that that's actually been pretty helpful. So that's something to think about. And then I think, let's see, Mike, let's see, my imagination online is much harder. Yeah, Mike, I would say it's definitely harder, and I would say it's harder for a couple of reasons. One, well, let me step back. At our institution, an 8-week course, you're trying to do 16, what a traditional semester of 16 weeks would be, into 8 weeks. And I want everyone to kind of keep that in mind. That means we haven't dumbed down the courses. We haven't gotten rid of. All we've done is make this a really intense period of study. So you're doing the same amount of work in 16 weeks, or in 8 weeks rather, as you would have done in 16. So that's something that you want to think about when you're signing up for your courses and be realistic about it, right? So that makes it harder. Online, I think, is harder as well because when you're in a classroom with people, there are these really, kind of quick ways to have interactions with them, with the professor. There's a lot of time when you show up at a class and you sit, you take notes, and you go. It's a pretty passive exercise. When you're online, everything you're doing is much more active. You've got to be much more mentally aware and paying attention and putting out the energy in a way that, you can get away with sitting and just listening to a lecture in a regular face-to-face course. And so that's going to make it, I think, a bit more time-consuming as well. Other thoughts on that?
I like Dr. Kachubi's reiteration of the importance of exercising, and I've been taking this out for a walk instead of just watching the dog walk.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the time when you really don't want to exercise, you just have to force yourself because afterwards you feel so much better about yourself. It's good for your body, but it's good for your mind in that it forces you to, depending upon the exercise, right? Some exercises, and when I was in grad school, the one that kind of saved me was I would go skiing. And because I was so terrible at skiing, I had to pay attention to everything I was doing so I wasn't constantly falling on my bum. So what happened was I would actually just be so concentrated on that I couldn't think of anything else. So there's some kind of back noise on this. If you're not talking, maybe you might mute *6. But yeah, so that was just a couple hour period where I could do nothing but kind of clear my mind of anything related to school, and it actually was quite helpful. Yeah, sure, it's a good point. It really is about social connections. I really think that's one of the most critical things. Just reading through the comments here. Yeah, Mike, it is. It's a miles better. It's. I guess I need new glasses. They haven't come in yet. It really is about that. You have to try harder in an online setting to connect with people, and it's not as easy as you just happen to be walking out a door together, or you just happen to be walking down the hall, or you run into each other in the library. You really have to be, as I said, much more intentional about any connections that you want to make. And I think, at the graduate level, it's so much more important to really make those connections and to go out of your way to figure out how to create connections at a distance. Because if you think about, there's two reasons I think that's really important. One is you go into the workforce, increasingly you may work at a company where people work at a distance, and you have to figure out how to manage people. You have to figure out how to, connect with the other employees or work in a team at a distance. And so this is a really good skill set for you to develop. So I definitely would encourage you to think about it that way, something that could be really useful. The other thing is, graduate students, you may need a letter of recommendation from a faculty member. Well, the best way to get that is if a faculty member really knows you, and they're only going to know you if you do a lot of reaching out and kind of try to form those relationships. And again, in a virtual setting, harder, but not impossible at all. Just reading through a few of these comments here. Okay, well, I'm going to turn it back over to you guys if you have any other thoughts.
No, I mean, that's pretty much, unless anyone else has any other questions, this pretty much concludes our presentation. We hope that you all did find it helpful and you have at least one tip or strategy that you'll be able to implement to help alleviate stress when things get tough. We also want to just remind you all to remember to just enjoy the process of being in grad school, and keep in mind that really nothing worth having comes with ease and that you will get through it. So we also want to wish best wishes in your studies, and thanks again for your time. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with the grad advising team. Our email address, I'll just go back a slide or two just for you guys to have that contact information. Sorry, I may have gone back too many slides, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys had the contact information, not just for us, for graduate counseling, but also if you needed to talk to Dr. Linden Meyer, that you knew that you could reach out to her as well. So thanks again, and have a good rest of the day.
Great, thanks for that. I really appreciate it. And so just a couple final thoughts from me as well. You know that something like 8% of Americans actually have a master's degree? 8. As in less than 10. So, you know, it is stressful, it is hard, but you're entering a pretty elite group of people who have that, and that's pretty amazing, right? So to know that it's going to be hard, you know, take the time off if you need to take the time off, but make an active plan to come back and finish. You will benefit you in terms of, you know, long term, if you look at the numbers for jobs and employment and all of that. So keep in mind that it's really, you know, it's worth it in the end. It's just, it can be hard at times, but find those supports that would make it easier for you, or at least kind of get you through the dark days until you can enjoy it again. And, you know, and I remember one time when I was studying for my comp exam, I had a professor say to me, enjoy this time. This is the only time you're ever going to know as much as you know about your discipline. And I thought, this guy's a joke. What is he talking about? All I'm doing is stressing out about, will I pass that comp exam? Won't I pass that exam? And sure enough, he was absolutely right, because you never have the time again to really delve into your discipline the way you do when you're really focused on your master's. So keep that in mind. I want to thank everybody, Mybert, for working the magic behind the scenes, everybody else for attending. It looks like we have another one coming up in December. This one is going to be myself and Dr. Jenny Douglas talking about the end-of-program requirements. So if you're wondering about what your end-of-program requirement is, how you can best prepare for that, she and I will talk you through that. And we are grateful that you were here. We wish you a happy Thanksgiving coming up, and all the best. Thank you.